It's also a historic day for New Jersey and the nation and America's economy. In just a couple hours, President Biden will sign the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act into law. The American people have been waiting for decades of this kind of large-scale investment in the 21st century infrastructure, and we're here to say it is finally happening. You know, I've always believed in the saying that there are no Republican bridges or Democratic roads. I will, however, say this. The last president spent 4 years talking about a big game on infrastructure, but that's all that it was, talk. At the end of the day, President Trump cared more about building silly walls than sturdier bridges and 21st century tunnels. It took a Democratic president named Joe Biden and a Democratic House and Senate to get the job done. And now, American workers are going to get the job done. And when it comes to building back better, there is no shortage of work to do. Our roadways, railways, tunnels, bridges, ports, and airports used to be the envy of the world. That's not the case anymore. In fact, the World Economic Forum that does these ratings of nations doesn't even rank the U.S. transportation infrastructure in the top 10. As chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I know that today's global economy is more competitive and interconnected than ever before. If we want to maintain our competitive edge over China, if we want more companies to invest in America, if we want the 21st century to be another American century, then we have to build the infrastructure our business and our workers need to win. The fact is, America infrastructure has suffered from decades of underinvestment. We are living off the greatest generation's investments, but we did nothing to build upon it, to improve it, to even maintain it. For too long, Washington's obsession with trickle-down economics has prioritized tax cuts for the wealthy instead of infrastructure investments that create opportunities for all. Well, that changes today. When President Biden signs this legislation into law, we will unleash transformative new investments in everything from roads and railways to drinking water to electric vehicle infrastructure and so much more. We're making the largest investment in public transit in history at nearly $90 billion. That's $39 billion in new investment, and the largest investment in passenger rail since the creation of Amtrak at $66 billion. This legislation will provide New Jersey alone with over $12 billion in guaranteed transportation and transit funding over the next 5 years. As the largest statewide transit network in the nation, New Jersey Transit will have access to billions of dollars for major upgrades, including right here in Bloomfield. The historic train station has served the surrounding community for over a century. But we need new upgrades to meet today's design and accessibility standards, which is why the bill also includes $1.75 billion in dedicated competitive funding to improve ADA accessibility at transit stations. New Jersey Transit's 5-year plans to modernize Bloomfield Station by raising platforms, expanding accessibility for those with disabilities, bringing the station into a state of good repair, and improving safety and the customer experience is just in line with that effort. While these upgrades are still in the planning stage, this eventual improvements will solidify Bloomfield's designation as a transit-oriented development transit village, and that leverages the station to drive greater revitalization in the community at large. We know that transit-oriented development spurs economic growth and economic opportunity. I think back to my time as mayor of Union City, when I fought to get us get Union City a stop on the Hudson-Bergen light rail line, which at that time was only an idea. They told me, no, it can't happen. No, it won't happen. No, having the Conrail tunnel access just is too expensive. Well, we knew that getting that stop was about more than getting people from point A to point B. It was about spurring new development, attracting new businesses, and connecting workers to new jobs. And because I also happened to be a state senator at the time, I said, well, guess what? Union City doesn't get a station, this line doesn't move. At the end of the day, I don't know if it still is, but that station, for a long period of time, was the point of the highest rate of passengers on the light rail system, and it unlocked enormous economic opportunity throughout the region. These are the kind of opportunities that will flow from investments that advance New Jersey Transit's long-term vision for better safety and reliability, increasing capacity, reducing pollution, and creating more transit options in underserved communities. Likewise, these local investments will help all riders realize the benefits of major projects like Gateway. Look, when the Hudson Tunnel and the Portal Bridge came online at the dawn of the last century, of the 20th century, they were feats of modern engineering. But what was cutting edge in 1910 isn't cutting edge in 2021. Today, the Northeast Corridor is the most traveled rail corridor in the nation, and yet it hinges on rusty relics from a bygone era. We cannot afford to jeopardize the critical infrastructure underpinning a region that generates 20% of the gross domestic product of the United States. So we're pleased to say that with $30 billion set aside for the Northeast Corridor and $8 billion in guaranteed additional funding for the capital investment grants on top of the money that we'll be fighting for through the annual appropriations process, we're finally going to get Gateway done. This effort has been years in the making, and today we're thinking about all the hurdles we face getting here. During the Trump administration, the president's political vendetta against our state and our region led to needless delays and funding obstacles. They made up entire new policies with no foundation in law just to try and derail the most important infrastructure project in the entire country. And who can forget back in 2010 when former Governor Christie canceled the Hudson Tunnel projects after the federal government had already committed then in 2010 when $3 billion was a lot of money, $3 billion. It was just 2 years later that Superstorm Sandy hit, and the need for new tunnels became more urgent than ever before. It's well past time we get this done. Let's not forget that infrastructure is also a quality of life issue and an economic justice issue, something that Senator Booker has driven home in the Senate. Here in New Jersey, households and communities of color are more likely, twice as likely, to rely on public transportation to make a living. And people who rely on public transportation spend more than 80% of their time commuting each and every day. For parents, a safer, smoother, swifter commute means spending more time where it matters the most, at home, making sure the kids have a healthy dinner and finish all their homework. That's precious time you can never get back. And traffic delays are just as painful for those who drive to work each day. We've included an extra $110 billion in this bill, above the baseline levels for projects that will repair and modernize our roadways, alleviate congestion, reduce smog and carbon pollution, and move people and goods more quickly throughout our economy. For New Jersey alone, there's nearly $8 billion in guaranteed funding to improve highways and repair outdated bridges, as well as billions of additional dollars that we can compete for. We're talking a lot about infrastructure and transportation today, but that's just really the tip of the iceberg of what this legislation does. The infrastructure bill also includes $55 billion for clean water projects, including $15 billion dedicated to replacing lead pipes and water lines throughout New Jersey and the nation. The mayor was leading in that regard here. The mayor of Newark is leading in that regard here. Well, now they have the firepower to finish their job. And we're fighting for more clean water funding in the reconciliation bill so that once and for all, we can say that when you turn on the tap, clean drinking water is a right to every citizen. We're also investing in environmental justice with $5 billion for cleaning up Superfund and brownfield sites that disproportionately threaten the well-being of our minority communities. New Jersey, unfortunately, is the highest rate of Superfund sites and brownfield sites in the nation. There's also $50 billion to improve resilience and prepare our communities for floods and other climate threats, and we've seen those from Sandy and Ida and elsewhere. while at the same time pouring an unprecedented $65 billion into modernizing our electric grids and building our electric vehicle charging infrastructure. After Superstorm Sandy and Hurricane Ida, New Jerseyans understand better than anyone we must invest in mitigation at the same time to reduce emissions. And because broadband internet in this day and age is not nice to have, but a must-have, we have $65 billion to make sure every community, from our inner cities to our most remote farm towns, can get online. We saw it during the pandemic when you had to stay home. Not everybody had access to broadband. Not every child had the ability to be able to connect with their classroom. Not every person who had to work from home had that ability. They will when we finish implementing this bill. So I have been in public service for nearly 4 decades. I know history when I see it. And today will be remembered as a day that America begins to build back better. And in the coming days, Democrats will be working hard to deliver the rest of our agenda. We're fighting for a reconciliation bill that will cut taxes for middle class and working families, that will lead the largest effort to combat climate change in American history, that will lower the cost of prescription drugs for consumers, and keep working families ahead by making child care affordable. These investments, there's what grows the middle class. They're worth fighting for, and today is a historic day where we begin just that. Just very briefly, I know this is longer than I normally would, but we've got so much to talk about here and so much to rejoice in, but that people need to know. And all of this, of course, means we're going to put people to work. Each and every one of these projects puts people to work at great paying jobs.